Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back down the rabbit hole. My name is Monty Hook and I am your host. I'm in the studio in Bali and I'm joined online today via Zoom by Mr. Glen Carlson. He's in Australia, down in the snowy mountains. Probably not so snowy right now, but Glen, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate your time.
Mate, I'm pumped. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So we've known each other for a couple of years. I'll give the kind of a brief snapshot of just the introduction. You're the co-founder of Dent Global. You can see the sign in the background there, Dent. You guys run business accelerator programs. I think you've had 3,500 people through your signature program, which is called the Key Person of Influence, which is something I want to touch on a little bit about today because it's very valuable stuff. I've been a fan of you and your business partner Daniel Priestley. The stuff that you come out with and your education is beautiful stuff. So thank you so much for joining me.
It's been a ride.
Yeah, what's give me the Wikipedia version of the story. How did you start Dent and what is Dent?
Yeah, so I mean, what we are is we're essentially a business accelerator. So in the same way that you could go to Silicon Valley if you've got a tech idea, put yourself in an environment that gives you access to all the resources you need, funding, strategy, advice, whatever it is, so you can just play your strengths. We do the same thing for more traditional businesses, often service businesses without the physical location. So we'll work with predominantly service businesses between 1 and 15 employees that have got a good track record, 5-10 years experience in their industry, but they've started to hit some kind of a plateau for whatever reason. And usually that has to do with the fact that they're good at what they do. They've got a decent product or service. However, they have been underestimating the power of the personal brand. And so everything we do is based on the idea that there are 3 brands. There's a product brand, a company brand, and a personal brand. So if you think company brand is Apple, product brand is iPad, personal brand is Steve Jobs, there is a lot of power in that personal brand. And so we work with founders to project manage the production of that personal brand. We've been doing it for about a decade. Like you said, we've had quite a few people come through our programs. A lot of our clients go on to, be TED talkers and, they feature in the media. We've produced over 1,000 authors now. So we've also acquired about 4 different businesses that offer services for sort of challenger brands as well. So we have a publishing company, we have a technology company, we have a video production company, etc. So basically we're on the lookout for anything that helps a business accelerate their journey. We want that in the Dent group. We want that in the ecosystem to be able to help them accelerate their journey.
Yep, cool. And Dent comes from the Steve Jobs phrase.
Yeah, so it's an homage to Jobs where he said, it's the role of every entrepreneur to make a dent in the universe. Otherwise, why are we even here? And it's to that spirit of being up to something beyond making money. It's that spirit of do it well or don't do it. It's that spirit of just kick the goddamn door off the hinges.
Yeah, and we'll touch on a little bit about that as well because, I'd like to talk a little bit about impact as well because you guys are not only making an impact with your business, but you're also passing this on to your clients and the greater community on how to use your business as a force for good. So, I think that'll be a good thing to talk about. But how has the last year been for you guys as a company? Like, I mean, there's a lot of weird shit happening in the world. How's it been for you?
Yeah, so we were named by Inc. as one of the world's leading business accelerators. It was a few years ago now, but I feel like I need to take a knee to COVID. COVID is definitely the world's leading business accelerator. And I think it's done more to channel, focus than any other thing. But look, obviously you're talking about COVID. For us, COVID didn't change much. It just accelerated a lot. So we've always been operating under the paradigm of, more media, more technology, more software. That's the way to scale. That's the way to impact more lives, more people, more efficiently, more profitably, right? And COVID just accelerated that. That was just probably we accelerated our business plan 5 years in one. So a lot of our model used to require geographic delivery. So we'd have speakers in locations, et cetera. And COVID just ended that because it wasn't possible. And then the moment that ended and we switched everything to virtual deliveries, A, we could bring in speakers from a lot more locations. B, we could have people dialing in from a lot more locations without the commute. So, literally we currently have clients across 55 different cities around the world that all tune in every fortnight to kind of go down the rabbit hole, so to speak, throughout our program. And so that's just been an absolute game changer for our ability to impact more people. And the fear beforehand was, the fear from the market was online stuff isn't as valuable, right? There's something about being in person where there's an element of truth in that. And the fear from our perspective is if we went online totally, people wouldn't accept it. Whereas COVID kind of forced that hand. It forced acceptance, not just for us, but for everyone, of this sort of virtual model. And, for a lot of our clients, they come to us for strategy and advice, right? And so instead of us doing these big 1 and 2 day workshops and conferences in an auditorium, we can now do a 3-hour chunk via Zoom every fortnight, no commute, just jump in, get after it, and then get back to it. And so not only have we found overwhelming feedback from people that had experienced both formats, that the new format is way better in terms of outcomes and efficiency, we're also finding that the community engagement is off the charts because people can meet more people, they can connect with more people, and we're seeing meetups popping up locally, like people catching up for dinners and doing local networking events, all kind of through the community. So we still have the physical real world community interaction, but all of the strategy is delivered virtually. So it's been great for us and it's been great for our clients.
Yeah. So what do you think this is here to stay? I mean, on the other side of COVID, if there is another other side of COVID, do you think things are going to go back to the way they were? You think that, what's your prediction of how things are going to be?
Nothing's ever gone backwards, right? Time doesn't go backwards. It'll be some kind of a hybrid. We're not far away from augmented reality anyway, where like you look at a can of Coke and it explodes into media that you can scroll through and all that kind of stuff if you're wearing the right pair of glasses or the right device. And so I think this is just an acceleration. I think it's forced a lot of certainly corporate infrastructure, small business infrastructure. I think it's going to have a big impact in the sense that a lot less people are going to have to work in cities. And certainly they're not going to have to work in buildings. Yep. So I think it's freed up. I think people are going to be able to experience a lot more lifestyle if they can, if they're not, working on the tools effectively.
Yeah. Well, this kind of leads me to a bit of a segue, I guess, to take it somewhat down a rabbit hole. So, I mean, my kind of thought is, COVID and the pandemic and, the lockdowns and everything. Well, the lockdowns are just a symptom of, everything. But I tend to think that this is a healing crisis for the planet, right? It's a crisis, but it's a healing crisis. Do you have a take, like you're a visionary guy, do you kind of have a take of what's happening on a big picture or a cosmic level for humanity?
Yes and no. Like there's part of me that wants to think that, but we've been singing songs that this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius, since the 60s, and you can go earlier and earlier and earlier. And every generation thinks they're in the magical time of reformation and transformation, et cetera. And so while it would be kind of cool to just be like, this is the dawning of the age of Aquarius, and this is where the world realizes that the way it's been operating is sick and, it needs a shift, and we've got to look after the environment. This is a way to be able to see that, CO2's dropped, and, we've got to think differently about how we do it and all that sort of stuff. But, I'm not a cynic. I think over time the world gets better, right? And we see that. But, do I think that there's something cosmically aligned? No, I think we've seen a massive acceleration of wealth and prosperity in some of the biggest countries in the world. And anytime you see that, you see the consolidation of cash, the consolidation of power, the consolidation of resources, and you see comfort. And wherever you see comfort, you start to see laziness, you start to see bloat. And I think we're definitely seeing that come to fruition in the sense that, the big institutions and the organizations that weren't ready for this have taken a real hit. Smaller, more nimble businesses are picking up the opportunity to be able to capitalize on the resources, the opportunities that the bigger businesses can't move fast enough for. But, you just see more and more people watching Netflix. For the most part. So while I would like to see this as the great awakening, my concern is that it's just getting people more comfortable. It's making people more comfortable with isolation. It's making people more comfortable with being disconnected. And I think we need to, and I am taking a personal, even more personal responsibility in my life to make sure that I'm using technology as a tool to bring me and my family closer together with the people, the ideas, and the philosophies that, make our life better.
Yeah.
It comes down to this. We say it a lot: create more than you consume. And this has created a time, certainly for people in lockdown, where it's just so easy to consume. Some of the most successful industries at the moment are media and movie production. Like, they're cranking it up. They know, like, we can just pump more hypnosis through the pipes, and that's what people are wanting. And I think that's always been the case, though. You can go back to the Roman Empire and the Colosseum, and people just wanted to be fed, entertainment. And so I think it's about deciding not to be that person. And I don't think that's changed in a couple of thousand years. And I don't think it's going to change in a couple of thousand years. I think, you kind of got to choose to go down the rabbit hole. And for those that do, it doesn't matter what time we're in. It's the age of Aquarius,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like that, of the creating more content they consume, being above the line. You're either above the line or below the line. You're on the right side of the trend, or you're on the wrong side of the trend.
Not even content, just create. Like, whether it's a business, whether it's a novel, whether it's a pottery, it doesn't have to be content. It's just, anyone that's seen like The Social Dilemma or that sort of stuff, we see the problem of being caught in the echo chamber of digital media and social media, etc. And so I think being conscious of the effects that the algorithms have on our beliefs in the echo chamber, and to just be aware of that and make decisions accordingly, I think is key. But mate, I think the majority aren't.
Yeah. So I've got a question for you, and this comes from two angles. One is, what's your visionary perspective, but also what are you seeing in the business and the businesses that you work with in terms of the trends of social media? Like, I had a conversation with somebody yesterday, and we were talking about Facebook, becoming less popular, and people have been so bought into, putting all their eggs into the social media basket over the last however many years. And what you guys have been teaching and preaching for the last, since you guys started, is to build your authority, so that regardless of the platforms, regardless of anywhere, if all that falls apart, your authority stands. Yeah. So are you seeing, do you kind of predict something changing with social media and Facebook and Instagram? Or?
So I'm really not a predictor, right? If I was any good at predicting the future, let's agree that, me and Warren Buffett would be sharing our tips on investing, right? So anyone but someone playing at the absolute upper echelon talking about the future, if they really had that good a track record, they'd be placing some pretty big bets. That's not me. That's not my skill. I see social media and all these other platforms just as a place to find my market. It's not that hard. Where's my audience? Currently, my audience is definitely on Facebook. It's definitely on Instagram. They're definitely on LinkedIn. They definitely have email. They definitely read books. They definitely listen to podcasts. And so that's where I am. Yep. Do I think my market will use augmented reality? Do I think my market will have like a virtual reality room in the future where they'll plug on a headset and go into the world? Damn right. Do we want to be there providing information and access to what we do in virtual reality? damn right. It's just the moment, for me at least, where I just go, where are my audience? They're not on Snapchat, right? They're not on TikTok. I've never looked at TikTok. I know the light is on and burning brightly for anyone under the age of 22, but so it's just where's my audience? That's what I care about. If Facebook disappears, well, Facebook is just a representation that people like to engage and collaborate and share shit online. So it will move to the next thing, whether it's Clubhouse or Twitter or, whatever the next platform is. I don't think the idea of people sharing ideas and collaborating on a platform online is going to go away.
Yeah.
Right? Do I think, Facebook has become the IBM or the Microsoft of social media? Yeah, they've become the Death Star. But people are still on it, right? They're on, and you know what? A lot of people don't care. A lot of people aren't tuned into, the politics behind all this stuff. They're just like, oh, what's my grandson doing today? That's the vast majority of those users. And to be honest, I'd say it's a lot of our clients. Yeah, I don't think most of the people we work with, they're small business owners. They care about making a difference, but they're not sitting there watching the news and trawling through what Zuckerberg up to behind the scenes and all the fucking conspiracy nonsense going on. It's okay, let's just how do we add value?
Yeah.
And so I don't get too caught up in the future. I don't get caught up in predictions. I just go, where's my audience? And because you're right, all of our content is very easy to repurpose for a new platform. So a new platform comes along and we'll be there.
Yeah. Yeah. What I like with that is, the systems will change, the platforms will change, but the fundamentals, they never change. So what are the fundamental tools that you think that entrepreneurs need to be equipped with for the next decade or so?
Ideas.
Yeah.
The ability to communicate an idea. Because it's like you said, let's say virtual reality, right? You can have the best technology, but if you can't communicate an idea that's going to make someone go, huh, that's interesting. Doesn't matter what the platform is. You can write a book and it can be a shit book. You can do a podcast and it can be a shit podcast. I love Simon Sinek, right? Start with Why Guy. You go and watch his TED Talk and it's terrible quality. It's terrible recording quality. It's like a little 480p square thing, and the audio's crackly. And it's one of the top 5 most watched TED Talks of all time. And it just shows you it's not the high definition 8K high gloss super fancy, and he's not even on a main stage. He's in a little room somewhere. It's like one of those little sort of side alley sort of TED Talks, and it just blew up, right? So I think the power of ideas is important. It's the recognition that people buy your product or service because they believe it's going to make their lives better in some way. Something formulated that belief, usually random chance. Whereas the people we work with realize that, well, if we were to share a message, share content, share ideas through all these platforms we're talking about, and if those ideas can shape someone's belief or the way they see the world, and that can shape their buying behavior, and if that's structured in such a way that leads people to want to buy your stuff, well, it's much easier to sell an idea, to spread an idea, than it is to sell a product or service. So I think, and I've thought this for 10 years, we've seen this for 10 years, that the most powerful thing you can do for your business is to become the go-to brand. The fastest way to become the go-to brand is to share the vision, the values, and the value proposition of your organization that changes the way people think about a problem. And so then if you leverage media specifically and software and technology around that, well, that's just the way to build a more robust business. If we look at the last 10 years, businesses that struggle across the board, doesn't matter where they are ones that are constrained by geography, like their location. They're a location-based offering, a butcher, a baker, a candlestick maker, a real estate agent, a masseuse, whatever it is. And they're constrained by time in the sense that they charge by the hour or they have to show up and like the founder is involved or the owner is involved in that process. But for example, when this goes live, right? If someone's watching this, someone could be watching this in New York at the exact same time as someone's watching it in Buenos Aires. Right? So not constrained by geography at all, sharing an idea or ideas. My daughter, she's 18 months old now. She could be showing her kids this in 40 years with no loss of fidelity, no wear and tear. There's not many things you can produce in your business that are instantly available everywhere for all time with no loss, no requirement of maintenance, no wear and tear for free. And so that's pretty profound. Like when you look around your business, like that chair you're on isn't going to survive as well as this piece of content, right? Yeah. Assuming the internet stays up, etc. So we see anything that leverages any mechanisms that leverage those principles of timeless, spaceless, no loss of fidelity, of being accelerants for business. So if you are constrained by geography and constrained by time, the more you start to leverage intellectual property, media, and technology, so ideas, media, content, and tech, software, the more you start to develop the value that is not constrained by time or space, and the more you start to build a business model that is not just scalable, but is built to take advantage of the times that we're in. Yeah. And so COVID accelerated the hell out of that, right? Because, I mean, it was happening for the last 15 years for sure. And then the last decade accelerating even more. And COVID's just gone bang, right? The starting gun fires, like we're away. And I think this is going to be a decade that creates a lot of haves and have-nots more than ever. I think it's going to take the middle out. And you're either going to have people where this is their best decade ever or people where it's their worst decade ever. And I think it's going to be the degree that they're leveraging IP, media, and tech.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So you're talking about time there. I think most entrepreneurs get into business because they want some version of freedom. They want financial freedom. They want freedom for time. But very rarely does it ever go like that. And one of the frameworks that I love that you guys have is the entrepreneur's journey, and it shows the predictable stages of business growth. And at every one of these stages, there's bottlenecks. There is, the founder's going to get caught up in different things, and there's different dynamics in the business. And one of the things that I love about that is it shows people what if you could predict what business was going to be like with 17 staff, but you were pulling your hair out and you were working 12 hours a day, would you bother going to that point, right? Yeah. So talk us through the entrepreneur's journey and these different phases, and there's a couple of sweet spots of freedom, I guess. Talk us through that.
Yeah, sure. So I mean, it starts at startup, which is lots of optimism, lots of enthusiasm, but no revenue, right? It moves into what we call the wilderness, which in US dollars is somewhere between 0 and about $500,000, say, revenue. Anything less than $500,000 revenue, and you tend to have a business that's very reliant on the founder, right? Because there's not enough money to have all this team doing stuff. So it's predictable, because again, the entrepreneur journey is very predictable. And when the problems are predictable, the solutions become predictable, so we can eradicate trial and error. That's the idea behind this. Trial and error is the enemy. So if you've got less than $500,000, you've got a owner-reliant business. When you've got an owner-reliant business, what does that mean? Well, it's the old cliche that if they stop, the business stops. Now, if you're in a situation where you can't stop something, just give it time, right? And you're going to have to stop. That's stressful. right? And also when you do have to stop, whether it's health or a holiday or a family crisis you got to deal with, you lose a lot of momentum. A lot of things break and you got to build that momentum up again, and that takes energy, right? And so it's not just time, it's energy is the key, right? I mean, time is important, but energy is the key. And so, and in fact, you can look at the Australian statistics, American statistics. The big things that increase the likelihood of business failure is owner reliance, right? It's not a business. It's just, an entity that's been built around the owner doing what they do. Again, butcher, baker, candlestick maker type scenario. And what tends to happen is if there is a good offer there, good product, good service, they tend to scale that inefficiency. So let's say you take that idea, there's some value there. Obviously we're in business, we're doing a couple $100,000, $300,000-400,000. You might have a couple of people, but it's still heavily relying on you, but it's working. So you grow and you hire more people. And now you're doing 1.5 million. You got 15 people on the team. You've got an average revenue per employee of about 100,000, which is terrible, right? So you as a founder aren't making any more money than you made early. In fact, you might be making less, but you've got a lot more moving parts, you've got a lot more activity, and there's this hope that if I just keep getting bigger, eventually the money will come. So you grow to 2 million revenue, but now you've got 20 people on your team and your revenue per employee hasn't changed. Right, you've grown in size, but the bottom line, the efficiency hasn't changed. And so people scale inefficiency into what we call the struggling boutique, which is kind of looking good, going nowhere. I've got team, I've got revenue, stuff happening, but behind the scenes, the owner is like, suffocating in their own creation. And so there's this little, and anyone that Googles the entrepreneur journey will find the video on this, right? But there's this little sweet spot in between 500,000 revenue and 3 million revenue with a high revenue per employee, right? And so what that would mean is if you're up the very, very top at 3 million revenue, you'd have less than 12 employees. There is a very clear transition point there. So if I'm talking to someone, they got between 2-3 million revenue, 12 employees or less, and they're thinking of growing, my advice is don't, right? My advice is get more efficient here, get more profitable here, optimize your revenue per employee here. Now, how do you optimize revenue per employee? Well, you develop assets, you develop media, you develop technology. So you're not just using people and time to leverage an outcome, right? You're leveraging software, you're leveraging technology, you're leveraging IP, and all of a sudden you're making every single person on your team more efficient. And that's a great sweet spot between 500,000, 3 million revenue, small team, founder has a strong brand, reputation in the industry, author, speaker, commentator, showing up as the key person of influence, all that sort of stuff. Business is no longer heavily reliant on them. It's reliant on them to be the brand, but that can happen in light brushstrokes, right? You can still go on a 2 or 3 month holiday, and the assets you've developed through content, podcasts, videos, etc., can do a lot of the work. If you disappear permanently, no, it'll still eventually, disassemble itself. And typically that's the journey that 95% of people that I'm ever going to talk to are going to fit in. It's a very, 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 very rare bird that's going to sit there with 3 million in revenue and $1 million a year in profit, let's say, where the business isn't relying on them and they can have 3 months off, that's going to sit there and go, no, I want to grow. Because that's a pretty good life for most people. Yeah. Especially if they've built their business as a force for good. They're contributing in meaningful ways. Life's good, why grow? Between 3 and 15 million in revenue is something called the desert. And that's where the business basically has to double 3 times. And in doing so, everything breaks. Culture breaks, systems break, infrastructure. All of a sudden, the founder is pulled out of their skill set, and instead of them doing what they usually enjoy, they're now being sucked heavily into organizational, operational complexity that accelerates geometrically, Like the vast majority of businesses blow up.
Yeah, and
trying to cross
and the dynamics. Yeah, the dynamics of the culture and the team dramatically
totally changes.
change. Yeah,
right. It starts off. You've got like a band of brothers and sisters. You know, bunch of misfits where they're on the team because they fogged a mirror and had a pulse. But then okay, we're crossing this desert, so you start hiring some adults, right? Some people with MBAs and stuff like this that want to be professional, and these two cultures don't mix, right? You end up with knowing everybody on a first name basis. To all of a sudden, there's people on the team, that you didn't quite know were there, or what are they doing, and what's happening, and all of a sudden Julie's having sex with Joni or Johnny, and there's issues there, and you've got to put a lock on the stationery cupboard, and like everything changes. Plus, the brand has to totally once you cross the desert, your business is completely unrecognizable from when it started. And usually for the founder, it's not fun anymore. They've got sucked out of their strength and into operational noise, which is why most don't get across there and blow up.
And I think the reason why, if entrepreneurs were going to do that, they would have the view probably to exit. They've already been through the pain. Why not push through some more pain, build it big, and do a big exit?
Yeah, it's a nice dream.
Yeah.
Right? Look, it's execution is everything, right? I mean, why not? Like, fantastic. If you can do it, do it. If you're going to do it, you've really got to have a love for business, right? So if you're a physio and you love physio and you love helping people, don't cross the desert, right? If you're sick of physio and now you love business and you love tinkering with business and you love business theory and you love, like, when you're dreaming at night, you're dreaming of like culture hacks that you can create. And like, if that's how you think, great, you're probably built to be able to cross the desert. But still, like, we use the analogy crossing the desert because, first of all, the idea of going and crossing the Sahara on a Bedouin trail, well, that sounds cool. That sounds romantic. So the idea of crossing the desert is exciting, right? Once you've crossed the desert on the Bedouin trail, what a cool story, right? So we love the idea of crossing the desert. And once you've crossed the desert, it's cool to be on the other side of the desert, but no one likes being in the middle of the desert. It's a goddamn desert. And so our recommendation is, first of all, if you can't get to the point where you've got a circa $3 million business that's highly profitable with a great team, and you are the key person of influence. So you can attract opportunity, you can attract media, you can attract talent, you can attract funding. If you're not there, you're not qualified to cross the rest of the desert. Like, if you can't get to that, what makes you think you can get to this other thing? And so we say, if you can get to that first point, well, then you can attract all the resources you need to cross the desert really fast, right? Because you can use your brand and reputation and mission, vision, purpose to attract the right team that can get you there ahead of time before you leave. You can stockpile the right resources. You can build a cap table where potentially you could sell off 10, 15, 20% to give yourself the capital to accelerate through that period. Like, you don't want to bootstrap through the desert. It's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to look at what would the business model need to look like as a $50 million business and start building that from scratch.
Yeah.
Or from that position of influence.
Yeah. So how do people become a key person of influence? We've talked about this. We've mentioned it about 100 times, and it's what you guys do, and you guys have got a really cool framework for that. So what can you give people now without giving everything away? How do people become?
Yeah, well, it's easy. Just buy the ticket, take the ride. So look, there's a set of principles, right? And it's in the Key Person of Influence book. And if you Google myself or Daniel, there's plenty of rabbit holes on that content. But there's a pretty simple formula to it, is that if you look around, every single industry has an inner circle, right? These are the movers and shakers, the people that are above the line. They're not caught in the noise of their business, right? It's not about the product or service. There's something else that they're doing. And through observation and our own experience, there are 5 things that these people do very well. And that if you want to have more influence in your industry, you've got to do well as well. You've got to have a great pitch. Your pitch a pitch doesn't happen in an elevator, right? Your pitch is every single piece of communication that you share with the market, whether you're talking to an employee looking at bringing them on board, whether you're talking to a client trying to close a deal, whether you're posting something on LinkedIn, right? So pitching is about paradigm building. It's about changing the way people think about a problem. It's like I was talking about before, the power of an idea. Good example of this, Anita Roddick, British entrepreneur, Body Shop founder. She didn't run around talking about bath soap and the ingredients of her moisturizing product. She ran around pitching the idea that animal testing was cruel. Right? And for her audience, young women resonated with that idea. Estee Lauder was evil, right? Sticking needles in bunny rabbits' eyes. And they were like, oh, that's horrible. The only place to get ethical skincare at the time, cosmetics and what have you, was the Body Shop. So by having a pitch that transcended the commoditized features, benefits, etc., she was able to identify a singular idea that if people would adopt that idea, they were more likely to adopt the product or service. So pitching is key, right? And the big mistake that people make is they run around pitching their product or service, and that is the wrong approach. That's number one. Second step, publish content, right? If you've got an idea that can change the way people think, the idea is, well, how do you then package that into as many formats as possible? So this is where we started the conversation. Where is your audience? Are they listening to podcasts? Are they on Facebook? Do they read books? What have you? And get those ideas into those formats, right? Channels, formats, and that simultaneously builds reach and authority all at the same time. People Google you, all that cool stuff comes up. You're seen as a thought leader, you're seen as more credible, it accelerates trust, it accelerates sales cycles, everything starts getting more efficient. Product is the third key idea, or it's more around creating a product ecosystem. So the mistake is like the plumber offers plumbing services or the lawyer offers legal services. But when, again, you look at a Simon Sinek, for example, well, he's got online training, he's got personal consulting, he's got books, he's got videos, he's got podcasts. There's a whole ecosystem of products that all work together as a whole. Excuse me. And the devil's in the detail. It's making sure all that fits together in a meaningful way and is aligned with vision, mission, purpose to bring people to a central point, which is ideally a high value product or service that's very profitable and makes a difference, right? It solves a complete and remarkable solution. Profile is about what are the assets of influence when it comes to cutting through the noise, building credibility. So having a speaker's kit so you can be invited to speak at events and conferences, showing up on social media, winning awards, being invited into traditional media. All that stuff builds credibility. When you go to these websites and they're featured in Inc., Forbes, Huffington Post, etc., that makes a difference, right? And so the idea of profile isn't running around saying, look at me, but it's recognizing that there are certain things that reinforce social proof. And so profile is very much about the elements that demonstrate to your market that other people have already deemed you as credible, right? Hence the awards or being featured in the media or, whatever the case may be. And finally, partnerships. Key people of influence collaborate with other key people of influence, and they have the products, the services, the systems, and the offerings to easily be able to collaborate with the key influencers and the key brands. And again, if you're just an accountant or you're just a lawyer, it's very hard to collaborate. It's like, okay, well, I'm an accountant, I'll collaborate with a mortgage broker, and that's about as sophisticated as it gets. But when, excuse me. But when you have this ecosystem, you have a powerful message, you have published content, you've got a product ecosystem, it's credible, you're featured in the media, you're winning awards, etc., it becomes very easy to start collaborating with the top end of town. And so what we find is if someone's already good at what they do and they just start focusing, baby steps on each of those 5 Ps, what they end up with when they look back 6 months, 12 months, 3 years later is a radical transformation in their positioning. And simply in their ability to attract opportunity, whether that's clients, whether that's team, whether that's media, whether that's investors. And it shifts from energetically an outbound chase to an inbound kind of opportunity. So instead of chasing butterflies with a net, you're working on, well, what kind of butterflies do we want? Let's take some time to plant those flowers, and all of a sudden, the butterflies just show up. And it needs to be built, it needs to be engineered, but that's the gist of becoming a key person of influence. Those would be the steps.
Yep.
5 Ps.
Yeah, you guys have got a good book which kind of goes into all of that in detail, the Key Person of Influence book. And there's actually a really cool the influence scorecard on the website. I'll make sure people have got the link.
So we've got the book. If anyone wants to find me on Instagram, just at Glen Carlson, DM me and shoot me your address. Let me know how you came across us, and we'll send you a copy of the book.
Awesome.
Happy to do that.
Amazing.
And part of what the book will show you is basically it talks about these 5 Ps, but it also says it's good to know where you're at in the context of those 5 Ps. And so we developed the world's, I think, most used influence scorecard, where you can actually benchmark where you're at currently against the best in the business. In terms of your pitch, publish, product profile, partnerships. If you just Google Key Person of Influence Scorecard, it'll pop up. You can do that for free. It takes about 5 minutes, and it'll give you a custom diagnostic identifying strengths and weaknesses and opportunities for growth. So it's a quantifiable way of approaching this concept of influence.
Very cool. Awesome. We'll make sure people have got the links as well. So make it nice and easy for people to go and check it out. Hey, let's talk about impact, because I know you guys at Dent, obviously that's in the culture of what you do. It's in your name that you guys are here to make an impact in the world. And one of the things that we're both part of is an organization called B1G1, which is buy one, give one, and they've got probably the best framework for, especially for small businesses and entrepreneurs, to actually introduce giving and impact 100%. Into their business in a very easy way. Now, one of the things that I noticed for myself, and I see in other entrepreneurs, in all the businesses that I've worked with, is there seems to be this, I guess, paralysis around contribution, right? We think that we need to make this huge amount of money, and then when we've got this money in the bank, well, then we can go and give, to our favorite charity or whatever, right? But what I've noticed is, especially with the businesses in B1G1, it's not about, saving and making a big contribution. It's about making very, small ripples. They can be tiny ripples, and embedding that into the business, so it becomes part of that culture. It becomes part of the influence that you're talking about. So talk us through how you guys do it at Dent, and what's the real importance of this for entrepreneurs, especially I think in the next decade. Consumers and entrepreneurs are becoming way more in tune with wanting to choose wisely, choose who they work with, etc. So I think it just becomes more important, right?
I mean, there's the commercial imperative, but I also just think it's about dying well. At some point, you're going to be on your deathbed, looking back at your life, giving yourself a final analysis. And for me, I want to be able to look back and go, I gave it a good nudge. I forged strong relationships. I served in meaningful ways. Making money and having toys is far down the list of the things that I think I'm going to be proud of when that time comes. So in my opinion, forget about the next 10 years. Forget about consumer choices based on being a business that clearly cares about, the community and the environment that you find yourselves in. I mean, yes, of course, but I think it's also going to just come from wanting to do the right thing, live well, and build a business that by its nature does good. And that's where B1G1 is a game changer, right? Because the old me literally would write a big check on stage, get the photos in front of the big audience once a year. And it's like, all right, that's that done, and off we go. And I think my heart was in the right place, but the execution was terrible. And the thing I love about B1G1 is that it creates the software and the tools to, like you say, make micro giving a daily thing. So you can give like 5 cents, right, every time, you know, you send an email or something. Like you can create these micro triggers, which are really cool. Now, I abdicated a lot of responsibility of that to my team, because when I said, look, here's the idea, our mission is, or our vision is, we see a world of entrepreneurial teams solving meaningful problems where every small business is a force for good. Right. So I say we want to be signing people up to the global goals, or aligning people to the global goals, signing people up to B1G1, and walking our talk. How we do it, up to you guys. Use B1G1, use the global goals, show me what we're doing. And that just got me out of the way. I mean, we got 55 on the team, right? So instead of me trying to have to come up with everything, they could go through all the resources and come up with all these amazing ideas, and it brought them into the mission of it. It brought them into the vision because they built it. And so, I mean, we run an accelerator program, and there's lots of stuff we want people to do. We want people to, you know, log in and get through the orientation. And when you do, bang, that triggers a giving impact, right? And it triggers it personally. You get an email and it signals it, and the group can see it, and it's cool. And then, you know, when you develop your first pitching asset, and you submit that, bang, that creates another trigger. And so throughout our accelerator, we've got 17 triggers, each of which align to one of the UN global goals. So by the time people graduate our accelerator, they've kind of pinballed themselves through all these giving impacts through their customer journey. And we do that in all sorts of different ways, but we do it to try and showcase ideas for them. And the most rewarding thing is when they come back and they're showing us like how they've modeled this piece or that piece into their own business. Because we're proud, man. We are loud and proud. We don't think giving is something that should be quiet. Like, we don't try and like, oh, we've given more. It's not about that. It's just about signaling that we see ourselves as part of an ecosystem. We see ourselves where we're capitalists, but we don't believe that we should be able to profit at the expense of human and natural resources. We also believe we're very lucky just based on where we were born and access to the resources that we have. We've won the human lottery. You know, I wasn't born into a rich family. My dad was in the Navy. My mum was a hairdresser, but still in the context of the world, I'd won the human lottery. I was born in 1981. And at that time, 44% of the planet were in extreme poverty. You know, now it's 9%. So the world is accelerating towards the world is getting better in so many ways. And don't get me wrong, we've still got our challenges, of course. And I like the fact that our business, our brand, our philosophy, the way we show up in the world is inspiring people to go, oh, yeah, that is important to me. I've just been so busy doing all this sort of stuff, but now it's that easy. I'm going to do that too. And that ends up being the most rewarding thing for them and for their team. And excuse me, it ends up creating a culture and a philosophy that gets people out of bed in the morning, which, you know, doesn't come when it's like, oh, we're in the business of helping engineering firms optimize their profit per blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, you can have a purpose for your client, but there's something about having a purpose that goes beyond money that can't be underestimated in terms of the cohesiveness that can bring to an organization. And we've certainly experienced that. And many people that we work with and that we work with via B1G1 have experienced that as well. And so not only does it make your business better, not only does it make the world better, but I think it's going to put me in a better position when I do look back on my life and give myself a rating. I think I'm going to feel pretty proud about that. Yeah.
No, I'm a huge fan of B1G1. And one of the things that one of the speakers at I can't remember which conference it was, B1G1 have these yearly conferences. And one of the quotes that stuck into my mind, I can't even think who the speaker was. He said, it's not our job to change the world, it's our job to create the next ripple. And I think, we've whether people are entrepreneurs or not, we think that there's almost like this massive pressure on us, like we've got to change the world. But that's where this paralysis kind of comes in. It's like, well, if I can't do this massive thing, then I'm going to do nothing.
Yeah.
But actually the greater impact you can have is with this making the ripples.
100%. Like, I think it was Warren Buffett, he gave last year 35 billion away, like cash. And you see that, and then you're going to like donate $15 to something, and it's easy to feel like a pleb, right?
Yeah.
And so I did some maths. Australia has 2.3 million businesses. If 1% of them took the 1% pledge, which means they'd give 1% of their revenue, right? Based on the average income, the average revenue, collectively, if every business in Australia, collectively, if 1% of every business in Australia it was if every business in Australia gave 1%, collectively, we would give $35 billion, same as Warren Buffett. And so that's small business, by the way, not big corporate. And so from my perspective, it's like, this is where I see that I don't need to be the Warren Buffett. I just need to be one of the people that are giving the 1% and inspiring someone else to become one of the people that give the 1%. Exactly. And then it fractals, right? Because if we all see ourselves as proud and wanting to rope other people into it, well, that's the way that we can become a collective, and the product of the whole becomes greater than the sum of the parts.
Yeah, and I think we completely underestimate our capacity for impact and making a difference just by the small things, because we think we've got to do such big things. And
it's like, and again, even that whole example of chasing the 35 billion mark, it's like, but if I can inspire my mate to get into it, and he gets into it, and he gets into the global goals, and he watches the video and B1G1, and all of a sudden, and his life is better, and his kids or her kids can now talk to their parents or their mum or their dad about how their business is making this impact. Like, what's that worth? So there's all these off balance sheet benefits that are the reason to do it. But the balance sheet benefits are certainly nice as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, indirectly it comes back to the balance sheets anyway. So yeah. Yeah. No, really cool. So Glenn, I've got one final question for you before I do that. Just want to acknowledge you, man, for the great work that you're doing, and being an inspiration for many entrepreneurs. And this culture that you guys have at Dent is very obvious, and the contribution that you guys are making to not just through the actual work that you do, but the ripples that you're making with other entrepreneurs is very profound, and it's very visible. I see it. So well done.
Thanks, dude.
Cool,
appreciate it.
Final question for you. And I'll make sure everybody's got the links to you, check you out, and B1G1 as well. I'll make sure people have access to check that out as well. So last question. Look, if you had the one-time superpower of mental telepathy and you could share a message with all 7.8 billion or whatever the number is now, humans on this planet, a meaningful message, what would that message be?
Be brave, have fun, go make a dent in the universe.
Somehow I thought I already knew you were going to say that, but it's worth me asking because the way that you share it is, it has the energy, behind it.
I came up with, those were my personal values that became the company values, and they came from me asking the question, if I was on my deathbed many, many years from now, having lived a full, rich, meaningful life, and a young child, like a granddaughter or great-grandson or something like that, was to come up to me and say, Granddad, before you go, please tell me I want to live a great life like you, or a meaningful life like you. What advice can you give me? And I pondered that for maybe 6 months thinking like, what are the principles for me of living a good life? And for me, being brave is about courage, and courage isn't about the absence of fear. It's the recognition that there's something more important than that. You know, when I think of being an Australian, when I think of our boys at the bottom of the hill in Gallipoli looking up at the Turks, you know, man, like imagine that. You know, talk about courage not being the absence of fear, but there being a recognition that there's something more important at play. I think of that a lot. I think of that probably more than I should. And I think, how do I do something worthy of them? And bravery, like the willingness to lean into the discomfort of me becoming the person that could do that is what bravery is for me. Having fun isn't about champagne and boats and roller coasters and fun like that fun. It's like I have the most fun when I'm given my gifts, when I'm in the zone, when I'm in flow, when my skills, my experience, my mission and my vision all kind of come together and I've got this opportunity to serve. And that's fun. And I think the more we can look for fun, not in the escapism, but we can look for fun in the creation at the nexus of us, sharing our strengths with the world. I think that's pretty cool. And then making a dent is about contribution. It's definitely around the service of others, but it's also just about kicking the door off the hinges. It's about not taking no for an answer. It's about doing some damage if you need to. You know, to make a dent implies that potentially the process isn't going to be gentle. You know, you're not necessarily picking a lock here, you're kicking the door off the hinges. And so I think if I could share something to my kids, it would be that. And so then if I could share something to the world, it would be that as well, is that I think the secret is to be brave, to have fun, and to do everything you can to make a dent.
No, that's really profound, man. And I also know that through the process of KPI and becoming that key person of influence and getting your time back, so that you are, that's really where you attune to what your gifts are, because you've got the space to really like hone in on that, and that's where business becomes fun, man. That's like, you get to do what's in your flow, and then all the other things just happen organically around it. So I earned my time back after I started connecting to the why, not before. People think, oh, you build a business and then you get all this time and then you can come up with all this cool shit. It's like, no, it's the other way around. Yeah. For your life as well, like you said. I mean, having those principles for your life before you're somebody, before you're, big or whatever, they're the foundations for, creating the best version of yourself and creating those big things. So, yeah. Awesome, man. Thank you so much for your time. I'll make sure everybody's got the links to check you out on Instagram and check out the scorecard and everything. Glen Carlson, thank you very much. Guys, thank you very much for joining, and I'll see you next time back down the rabbit hole.